When you do call them out, like I said, you need to be prepared for gaslighting in every which way. You're going to hear things from them, like I said, everyone watches porn, or it's not that big a deal, or you are being such a prude, or maybe if you had sex with me, or maybe if you hadn't gained weight, then I wouldn't be watching it. Again, particularly diabolical because they're blaming you for their behavior. So let's talk about narcissistic people on sexting because they like it. The so-called act of sexting has been in the news a few times this week, and that made me think about sexting, right? Because it's something that comes up quite frequently in with narcissistic people and narcissistic relationships. Now, here's the thing, folks. Sexting is not limited to narcissistic relationships, and in fact, if you have two consenting people who aren't hurting other people, sext away. But sexting is very much a narcissistic thing when they're already in a relationship. So let's just talk about narcissistic folks and their sexting habits. First of all, what is sexting? It is intimate sexual text messaging or DMing or some form of quick electronic communication that may involve sexual talk, sexual images, pictures of specific body parts, or of one or the other person in the relationship in various states of undress. It can veer into even what sounds a little romantic, telling someone you can't stop thinking about them, or maybe even that you love them or miss them. So some of this sexting may actually take place in a regular relationship setup. Again, it may be two consenting people who are not in other relationships who have started dating, and now things are heating up. Like that's sort of the healthy version of sexting, assuming that it's consensual all around. But it goes off the rails when it's a behavior that's happening outside of a primary relationship. So why do narcissistic people so often sext when they're already in a relationship? First, keep in mind, again, I highlight this because I don't want you to think sexting is only a narcissistic thing. Anyone can do it. You may have done it under better circumstances where it didn't involve cheating. But when it becomes a sort of tool of infidelity, it enters a new plane. And this is where we are more likely to see the narcissistic folks show up in their sexting glory. So as with many of the nesting patterns here we talk about, not all people who sext are narcissistic, and many, but not all narcissistic people engage in this behavior, right? And certainly when it comes to doing it while they're in a relationship, that's very much a narcissistic thing. But narcissistic people love sexting for the simple reason that it gets them some quick and dirty supply as needed. It is far less logistically demanding than cheating in real life and can be deleted much more quickly. And none of those infernal credit card hotel receipts and dinner receipts to deal with. Because narcissistic folks have no empathy, they can engage in this sexting behavior with abandon without caring about whom it would hurt because they don't care. And because narcissistic folks are entitled, it's not unusual for them to feel that they can do this across all kinds of inappropriate boundaries, including in the workplace, sexting a partner's friends, but they also feel entitled sort of to the entertainment aspect of it. But ultimately, this form of messaging is almost like a dopamine hit for them in the middle of the day. Narcissistic folks do not like living humdrum lives. Being ordinary is the worst thing for them. So when there's an opportunity to get a hit of sexual validation in the middle of the day, you're so hot, I think about your fill in the blank all the time, they feel entitled to that too. And they do not care that they're hurting their partner. And at the core of it, a narcissistic person is unable to ask themselves the simple question of, how would I feel if I saw my partner sending these texts to someone? The sexting almost becomes like a pressure valve for the narcissistic person. It becomes a very twisted way for them to regulate. But the lack of empathy means, again, that it is a tool that they're using to regulate that could really hurt someone, and they really don't care. It's also a very portable validation tool. They can take it with them anywhere. They can do it during a meeting at work, while they're watching the kids, as they lie next to you in bed. Regulation is a real problem. Emotional regulation, behavioral regulation. It's a real problem for narcissistic people because they always need from the outside. Thus, we also see correlations between narcissism and addiction and substance use. The sexting is a way to do that. Remember, too, that narcissistic people are impulsive. So they do stuff quickly and without regard for consequences, especially if that consequence is someone else's hurt feelings. It's sort of a shoot first, make excuses later situation. And since narcissistic folks are so good at blame shifting, rationalization, and lying, the impulsivity, lie about it sort of later sequence, often supports the likelihood of this sexting behavior. But the texting thing raises a fascinating opportunity for gaslighting for them. In quite a few of these sexting cases, believe it or not, the sexter never meets the person they're sending these messages to. They just send these deeply inappropriate messages and never actually connect with the person in real life. Maybe they met them one time in real life and then they don't cross paths again. And there's lots of reasons for that. Some of it might be a logistical, that other person may also be in a relationship. It might be distance. It might be financial. Somebody lives too far away. And believe it or not, in some cases, because the narcissistic person doesn't want to blow up their lives, which feels so awful if you're in one of these relationships, because that means that they know that this sexting behavior is wrong, but from the point of view of what would getting caught do to me versus I am hurting my partner or my spouse, right? It's all about what it would do to their life, not that this is hurting someone else. It's different. But what it means is that when the narcissistic person is caught in all their sexting, and they often, but not always are, all hail the cloud, they will deny, attack. Why were you looking at my phone, you weirdo? And then play victim. Everyone's always looking for a way to bring me down. But sexting is one of those funny things. You can easily screenshot the hard evidence. So if it comes up on another device in the household, bang. And then they can only do the deflect for so long because you got it right there. When they finally do have to give in, the gaslight begins. Oh my gosh, it was just texting. Jeez, it's not like I ever saw this person. We never had sex. I met them one time at that work thing. And that stuff may be true. You may even talk to other people who are on the fence about the morality of sexting. They might say things, well, if you never met the other person, it's not cool, but... And the but is, well, maybe it doesn't qualify as cheating. I think it does. That's my opinion. Folks, your life is not an effing court of law. If someone does this to you, it doesn't matter if it doesn't fit some agreed upon definition of infidelity. First of all, if this sexter is narcissistic, your relationship with the narcissistic person hasn't been a picnic anyhow. There may have been multiple other kinds of betrayals. And you may also be dealing with a day-to-day landscape of invalidation, and ultimately, invalidation and betrayal, they hurt. The gaslighting from the narcissistic person, oh gosh, stop making such a big deal out of this. It was nothing. And then they double down with, you're always the one who's always focused on all these little details. You never just hang out with me. You're always so uptight. You're the problem. So then it's your fault that they did this. Then, when it comes that kind of thought, like, is this really cheating, comes from other people, even well-intended other people, people might say to you, like, I get it, I know you're hurt, but it's not like they had sex. Maybe you shouldn't make such a big deal out of it. Now, you're being gaslighted all around, and you're the one who is betrayed. Because when this happens, and especially if the so-called sexter is narcissistic, it is a betrayal. It does all the things to you that betrayal does. It steals a sense of trust, of safety in the world. It fills you with self-doubt, with self-blame, with an unsettled feeling. You feel humiliated. You feel on edge. You ruminate. You wonder what you missed. You get pulled out of your own life because of their behavior. And when everyone around you is invalidating you, listen, even some therapists sometimes downplay it and say, well, it wasn't okay, but they are apologizing and they never did meet up with them. They never had sex. You literally feel like you're losing your mind. I know we're never going to come to consensus on whether sexting in the absence of sexual contact qualifies as cheating. To me, it does, but I don't make the rules. And frankly, that consensus doesn't matter. We waste so much time trying to figure out whether these sexy texts are cheating that we lose sight. Cheating, not cheating, it doesn't matter. This was a betrayal. Ultimately, and I say this about narcissistic abuse all the time, the narcissistic people are going to keep narcissisticing in all the ways they do. Betraying, lying, invalidating, manipulating, shaming, blaming, raging, gaslighting. It's what they do. It's the scorpion of it all. The scorpion is always going to sting. You cannot make them a pet. What matters really is what it does to us. And we tend to overlook that as being the most important thing, because it is. Sexting is a great example of how we soft pedal these narcissistic behaviors, write them off as just what sometimes happens in a relationship, and that relationships are hard, and that you need to forgive, and that nobody is perfect, and glass houses, and all of that bullshit. It becomes a one-way street of you having to be full of grace. And that, folks, is not a relationship. That is self-abandonment. That is self-silencing. Something happened to you, and it's real when you get hurt like this. I am sure in the comment section here there will be disagreement, and some of you don't think this is cheating, and that's fine. Frankly, that actually doesn't matter. And again, I'm not talking about maybe the passing wink on a message that may be a little cuter than it should be, given that someone is in a relationship. I am talking about inappropriate images and words, and ultimately, there is one incredibly simple litmus test on sexting. How would you feel if you saw your partner sending a text like this to somebody else? If the answer is you would be completely fine with it, then it's probably not sexting. Listen, we see sexting behavior in people who are not narcissistic. We do. Some folks who engage in this behavior that I have talked with clinically have said that while they do this, they're mildly dissociated while it's happening. And they liken it to sort of almost participatory pornography in a way. And they feel a lot of shame, guilt, and remorse when they are caught. Doesn't mean their partner's not hurt, but at least their partner doesn't feel crazy. This might also be part of a picture of compulsive sexual behavior, something that's sometimes termed sex addiction. But when there's no narcissism on board alongside this compulsive sexual behavior, you may actually see genuine apologies, genuine guilt, and a concerted effort to attempt to address it. However, if you are in a relationship like this, while the other person's accountability may help in your healing, betrayal is betrayal. And if it happens multiple times, the apologies can start to feel hollow. However, that lethal combination of entitlement, lack of empathy, selfishness, impulsivity, dysregulation, need for validation, excitement, and arrogance, that sense that they're not going to get caught, is what sets up a narcissistic person to be the perfect sexter. And if you are on the other side of this as their partner, it hurts because it is a betrayal, no matter how someone else tries to frame this. And if you see those messages, sometimes they were sent while they were just sitting there in bed next to you. You can't unsee them. And they are often images and words that can not only haunt you for a long time, but also leave you with that heavy feeling of what's wrong with me. I hope you can hear me when I tell you 100% nothing. The phone and the unthinking, unempathic, and frankly, unhinged behavior, that all belongs to them. And if you're going to ask that question of what's wrong with someone, at least ask it about the right person. And simply ask, what the hell is wrong with them? And lately, it doesn't matter. Because even knowing that what's wrong with them. You know, it's the damn narcissism. It doesn't fully make the hurt go away. But it can help you heal because, folks, it's not you. This was an interesting topic that came up, and it is an issue. Let me sort of start it with a strange sort of disclaimer. This is not a moralistic video. Like, if there is an adult out there who wants to watch pornography and presuming that that pornography features only people who are consenting to being in that film or medium, then you do you. You know, this is, again, this is not moralistic. This is very much a video about somebody watching pornography. They're in a relationship typically with someone else. That person they're in a relationship with is taking offense to it or is saying, please don't do this. I feel disrespected. Please stop. And the person, in this case, in this video, we'll be talking about a narcissistic person, won't stop. And there's a lot of betrayal and bad feelings around that. So I want to break this down, though, why it is if you're in a relationship with a narcissist and they keep watching pornography, why they're not. So again, not meaning to take a moralistic stance about this in general. It's just really about this unique kind of a situation within the narcissistic relationship. So this could actually be a very quick video if I were simply to say, talk to me about narcissism pornography. Yeah, narcissists probably do watch more pornography than people who are not narcissistic. Now, again, I'm going to reiterate this disclaimer that I made. The stance I'm taking in this video also is, in the literature to date on pornography and narcissism, is based on heterosexual porn. So it's based on a man watching a pornography while a woman in a relationship with him is uncomfortable with it. And that is a bias in this video. So I will need to do more research on non-heterosexual relationships to talk more about it in that setting. But this is very much focused on heterosexual relationships, okay? Now, to anyone who's ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, this revelation that narcissists watch more porn is not going to be surprising to you. Your partner's pornography consumption may still be, or was, a chronic source of discomfort, even resulting in a sense of betrayal in your relationship. It may feel that their pornography watching is compulsive, something that they do too often, too regularly, and may also be something that you experience as being inappropriate within the boundaries of your relationship. But what is it about narcissists and pornography specifically? Because as a personality group, they really do gravitate to it. I'm going to be talking about the narcissism pornography connection. Someone I worked with actually at one of the retreats programs I had done, and she's an incredible survivor of narcissistic abuse. She reached out to me about this particular question, and interestingly, in her letter to me, she steered me to some of the academic literature on this topic. For example, there was a study published in 2014 by Casper and his colleagues, which showed some interesting associations between internet pornography consumption and multiple measures of narcissism. The architecture of narcissism fits well with what pornography delivers. One of the core deficits of narcissism is a deficit in the capacity for intimacy. For narcissistic individuals, relationships largely serve as a tool to regulate their self-esteem. And so their relationships aren't really about love, reciprocity, respect, or mutuality, but rather with the narcissist getting what they want and what they need from the other person. It also means that all of the elements of intimacy become devoid of depth and serve to feed the need for the narcissistic supply. So sex becomes complicated, and when it's viewed through a healthy lens, sex is really about emotion and connection. But when sex is viewed through the limited capacity for intimacy, that is really the province of narcissism, it becomes about power, gratification, control, performance, and validation. And pornography delivers on all of that. Pornography takes sex and boils it into a consumable commodity, and it's consumable on demand. It requires no empathy, no connection, no reciprocity, no respect, and no regard for the other person. It's superficial and it's visual, and thematically, it can often feature themes of degradation, control, and power. But above all else, pornography makes no demands on the narcissist other than maybe that they have a subscription to a site, which is exactly how they like their relationships, isn't it? No demands, no pressure, no asks, all gratification. Pornography is convenient, and convenience is the one thing narcissistic individuals want most from their relationships. But in essence, the ubiquitous availability of pornography means that people with major intimacy deficits, like we see in narcissistic personalities, can keep reinforcing and feeding their unhealthy schema, which is their issue, until the narcissist brings it into an intimate relationship. Now, one theme that often arises when one partner confronts the narcissistic partner about their pornography use is, not surprisingly, gaslighting. They'll say things like, everyone watches porn. It's not that big a deal. Men are visual. Now, none of these statements and defenses ever take into account the idea that their partner is hurt or bothered by their narcissistic partner's chronic consumption of pornography. Their unwillingness to recognize their partner's sense of betrayal or hurt that they're watching pornography is a clear manifestation of the utter lack of empathy and the chronic need to justify their behavior. This stance, on top of all of the other gaslighting that is happening in the relationship, can be incredibly destabilizing. It's not unusual for a person whose partner is engaging in chronic pornography use and who is being gaslighted to start saying that they feel like a prude, or even better, the narcissist will often pull out the ultimate gaslight. The narcissist will say, I'm watching porn because you don't have enough sex with me. It's like an alcoholic blaming their drinking on other people. Narcissists can't take responsibility for their behavior ever, and least of all when it is being judged negatively. Now, it's interesting because one thing we do know is a core issue around pornography watching is shame. And one of the core issues in narcissism is shame. So that means that their rage about you calling out their pornography usage is often magnified. Narcissists hold too grandiose an image of themselves to want to be seen as a person who is secretly pleasuring themselves while they're watching pornography on their phone while everyone else is asleep. In some cases, the more malignant narcissists will play off their pornography watching as normal. Shame may be less of their dynamic, but the shame dynamic often means that your calling out of their pornography viewing will activate the shame rage cycle for them. And when you do call them out, like I said, you need to be prepared for gaslighting in every which way. You're going to hear things from them, like I said, everyone watches porn, or it's not that big a deal, or you are being such a prude, or maybe if you had sex with me, or maybe if you hadn't gained weight, then I wouldn't be watching it. Again, particularly diabolical because they're blaming you for their behavior. And this has left many people who have narcissistic pornography viewing partners wondering, maybe this is my fault. I haven't been having sex with him as often, so maybe what he's doing is normal. Hold on to your reality. If something doesn't feel right, then typically it's not. Some people also view themselves, and want to view themselves, as really progressive. And they struggle with whether they're being provincial because they're asking their partner to watch pornography. You know what? It's okay to set boundaries that feel appropriate and healthy to you. Too many people in narcissistic relationships stretch their boundaries to an uncomfortable point. They go along to get along, and it's not good for your mental health to do that. Don't feel pressured to give in to their gaslighting. Another gambit they will often try is, wouldn't you rather that I just watch pornography instead of cheating on you? As though that's a meaningful choice. They feel entitled to their pleasure no matter whom it harms. Again, narcissists don't have empathy or regard for other people, so they do not even consider or care that their partner may view their behavior as a betrayal. Now, some people will gaslight themselves and say, well, at least he isn't cheating with someone else, so maybe I just need to be okay with it. You actually don't. It can be a conversation with your partner, but you do not have to unilaterally adjust to what works for them. You may be wondering, are some people okay with a partner watching pornography? Yeah, some are, absolutely, but not most. In some cases, the pornography is something that gets integrated into a couple's sex life. They watch it together. But in almost all cases of narcissistic hyperconsumption of pornography, it is something they do alone. They do not talk with you about it. It is never a conversation or a collaboration. And finally, many narcissists already hold dismissive and contemptuous views of people over whom they want to control and dominate. And in the case, at least, of heterosexual pornography, it is often designed to demean and humiliate, as well as to maintain derogatory stereotypes of women. If a person watches pornography enough, it can reinforce these dismissive and contemptuous stereotypes, which then can turn into even more dismissiveness within their intimate relationship, just when you thought it couldn't get worse. Now, again, I know this video is biased to a certain kind of gendered assumption and relationship assumption that men watch pornography and these are heterosexual relationships, and it's a limitation of this video. But I also know that many people in narcissistic relationships have struggled with this scenario and experienced significant betrayal and humiliation as a result of their partner's pornography consumption. If you remember also that narcissistic sex is also very performative. They like to show off in bed. So you can understand their attraction to pornography. Pornography is improbably well-groomed and well-shaped bodies having sex in improbable positions, in improbable circumstances. It's all very grandiose. And because narcissistic sex is grandiose, and it's stripped of all intimacy and connection, they bring those grandiose assumptions to the bedroom. If a person is watching porn, nothing that is happening in their regular bedroom at home is likely to keep pace with that. In fact, some people will say that in the early days of their relationship, the exciting sex with the narcissist is what got them or kept them on the hook. Somehow, the kink fest starts to become a little less practical when your poodle insists on sleeping in the bed with you or you're sleep training an infant. But the performative sex show that the narcissist yearns for and almost needs to get validation from means that many people feel that they just can't keep up with the sexual demands and novelties that a narcissistic partner may have and crave. And as real life creeps in, those narcissists will waddle on over to the internet. Different people view pornography watching in different ways. Some people see it as betrayal. Some see it through the lenses of indifference. Some are disgusted by it. The most important thing is that you don't judge your reaction to your partner's porn watching. And if your partner cannot respect your request, then porn or no porn, maybe that's all the wake-up call you need. That a request that you're making within the intimate space of your relationship cannot be honored. Pay attention to that, because it's definitely not speaking well about the overall health of your relationship. If you have any thoughts about this one, drop it in the comments. Like I said, I know the limitations of this video, so if that's your comment, please know that I'm seeing it. I get it. But so many people have had this question, and yeah, short answer, narcissistic people do watch more porn. So let's talk about cheating. It doesn't feel good to be cheated on. It really doesn't. And even some of the most open-minded people in the world obviously get hurt. Jealousy is a universal emotion. It is something our brains are wired to feel. We don't like it when our partner strays. It feels like a betrayal. It impacts us in terms of our ability to trust. We don't like it. Some of you may have cheated. more of you have been cheated on. And you will often see it as one of the greatest betrayals you've ever had. In fact, many people will say if they were cheated on, it has changed how they view trust for many, many years going forward. In fact, many people say they're never even able to trust again. One thing we do know, and we talk about this in the 30 Days of Narcissism, is narcissists cheat. It's something many of them do. Not all. And I get into that distinction of why not all of them cheat in that video. But many of them do. Why? Because when you're a narcissist, you get bored of your narcissistic supply. That's why they're sometimes not very good at long-term marriages. After a while, they want someone younger. They just want someone who brings different supply. They want someone who makes them look good in public. They want someone who validates and admires them in a new way. They want someone who sends them flirty texts. They just constantly need narcissistic supply. Cheating is a great way to get that. Doesn't make it any better for you, but that's really what it is. They're thinking like, oh, I already have your narcissistic supply. Not that interesting. You might have already been discarded a little bit too, because you're just, again, after a few years, they do get bored. They may try to control you. They may try to call all the shots, but they're definitely getting bored with you. So they cheat, and that brings in new narcissistic supply because narcissists are so entitled. They feel like they have the right to cheat because they should have anything that they possibly want because they're so grandiose. They think that this is the grand love story of the ages and that they should have it and view themselves as being in some sort of grand epic love story while they have this love affair and use all kinds of rationalizations like, well, this is how they do it in France or some other such thing. One thing that a narcissist does not do when they cheat is really think about how this is affecting their partner. And that is where sort of the devastation lies. When I've worked with clients who have endured infidelity in a marriage or in a long-term relationship, I've often asked them, would you have preferred that they talk to you about this first? And in most cases, people say yes, though that would have sucked too. I would have simply liked it that they wanted to work on this relationship or that I was enough. Remember, when someone cheats on you, it's not because you're not enough. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the person who's making that choice. So the fact is that many people will say that, yeah, I would have just preferred to not been deceived, because it's the deceiving. And what narcissists do when they cheat is they gaslight. That's not true. I'm not doing that. And they will deny and deny and deny cheating until you have video proof. And then they'll say, oh my God, all right, enough. Yes, I did it. You just get so crazy that I didn't want to tell you the truth. So now they, who have deceived you and lied to you, are turning it around and saying, I simply couldn't tell you this because you are the one who's unhinged. Gaslighting on steroids. When a narcissist cheats, it feels invalidating, as all cheating does. But more than anything, it's to give them validation, narcissistic supply. It plays on their entitlement. And it's not unusual for narcissists to be serial cheaters. They will apologize. They will go to therapy. They'll cry their crocodile tears. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I messed up our family. Or they'll gaslight. It really wasn't that bad. She didn't mean anything. We were going through a rough patch. And you believe it. And you take them back in. Or maybe you don't believe it, but you don't want to blow up your family. So you accept it and you move forward. And you may even forgive it. And then they do it again. Those ongoing betrayals are like breaking a bone over and over again in the same place. So, what's the difference between that and being cheated on by somebody who's not a narcissist? If you read the work of famed psychotherapist Esther Perel, who's done some really, really interesting work writing about and speaking about infidelity in relationships, she takes the point of view that not all cheating is created the same way. And she actually highlights the fact that in some relationships, they actually use it as a wake-up call. They grow from it. Instead of it destroying them, they take some important lessons from it and pay it forward into their own relationship. She sees that cheating is sometimes a byproduct of excitement seeking in a relationship. It may reflect different temperaments in a relationship, but that reparation can be made. Because Esther Perel works with a different patient population than I do, I don't see that as much because I tend to work with people who are dealing with narcissistic cheaters. But her work is actually really quite compelling, and she makes the points really, really well. So then this takes us back to this point of these excitement-seeking sort of garden variety non-narcissistic cheaters. The non-narcissistic cheaters can actually be kind of nice people. They're people who may have actually started kind of the relationship, the marriage started losing its mojo, or the relationship started losing its mojo. There was more time maybe spent on kids or careers. The couple may have been traveling a lot. They were in different places. They got married very young. And one person wanders out of the relationship and they get caught in it, or they fess up to it. And meaningful conversations ensue. But one of the most meaningful conversations is often the authentic and genuine devastation that the cheater felt at how badly they hurt their partner through their dishonesty. It keeps them up at night. It destroys them. They recognize the hurt. They even recognize it while they were doing it, and will recognize that they got caught up in everything. It wasn't as much about narcissistic supply. It was about a different dynamic. But here's the key difference. And this is the key difference between being cheated on by a narcissist and being cheated on by a non-narcissist. The non-narcissistic individual will actually often implement the lesson, will apologize in a genuine and authentic way, will commit to never ever doing this again, and will do the hard work of breaching that rupture and fostering trust again in the relationship. It will be a meaningful, heartfelt gesture. I've seen it in clients I've worked with over the years. It is committed. The couple gets past the rupture. They recognize the period that it was, and they recognize it as any rough patch in a marriage. Same as they would maybe someone losing a job or having to move to a city they didn't want to go to, or nursing somebody through a major illness in the relationship. It was a blip. It was a moment. It's something they learn from. And if anything, that non-narcissistic cheater commits themselves head over heels into the relationship, recognizing the importance of things like mindfulness, being respectful, being aware, being open, and communicating openly about what both of them need in the relationship. It is a very different experience down the road. Listen, at the time the revelations come out, whether you're cheated on by a narcissist or a non-narcissist, it feels very similar. It feels like a betrayal. It feels like a breach of trust. It hurts terribly. You feel misunderstood, unheard, unseen, and most of all, sadly, what so many people believe is that they're not good enough when they're more than enough. It's your partner who did this. It's not a reflection of you. But as time goes on is really where you see the difference. If you've been cheated on by a narcissist, the narcissist wants everything to go back to the way it was. Come on, let's just pretend that didn't happen, or it wasn't that big a deal. Gaslighting, denial, all kinds of things that play with your reality. It did happen, and it did hurt. And as the person who was hurt in this, you do deserve that opportunity to talk about those feelings and feel like you're safe enough to talk about them. When we contrast that to being cheated on by a non-narcissist, it feels very, very different. The non-narcissist is willing to sit and hear your pain, is genuinely contrite and apologetic for what they did, would understand that there may be a very real consequence to their actions, and instead of denying it or minimizing it, will say, I messed up, I hurt you, and if you decide that you can't stay in this, I have to respect that decision. That feels very, very different that someone's like, it wasn't that big a deal, it was only one time, what's wrong with you, why do you keep making such a big deal out of this? That's a very, very different feeling. In the second scenario, in the second scenario, you may still feel like you can't get past this, and that's okay. Sometimes people can't, and that is okay. You can give yourself that permission. But sometimes people feel like they can, and learn from it, and move forward, and implement this life lesson into their relationship. That's very possible if you've been cheated on by someone who's not a narcissistic, invalidating person. Not so much when you're with a person who is a narcissistic cheater, because there's all kinds of other stuff that go with that, of being chronically invalidated and disrespected and devalued in so many other ways. The cheating just becomes part of a longer list. Whereas people who are cheated on by non-narcissists will say, you know, the relationship kind of felt like it was going on as usual, though he seemed like, or she seemed a little bit more distracted than usual. But because there was some other good connective tissue, perhaps around things like respect, which obviously has ruptured a little after that experience, but shared interests and that kind of thing, those things can sustain and again make the connective tissue that can help a relationship like this last. It's important to understand the difference, because what ends up happening is if you go online and you seek out guidance on infidelity and how I should be healing, a lot of that information is all smushed up. Narcissistic and non-narcissistic cheating, all those stories together. They're very different stories. Only you know if you're in a relationship with somebody who's narcissistic and that this is part of a larger pattern. You can definitely tell the difference. The denials, the gaslighting, the twisting the truth, all of that. That has a very different feel. The micro cheating, the ongoing doing it not once but twice, but 3 times, but 4 times, feeling entitled to it, it feels very different. They'll be entitled in all areas of their life, not just in their infidelity. And it's all really, really uncomfortable. You know that that experience feels very invalidating all the way around, and that you've got a bigger problem than infidelity. That's one of many problems you have to deal with when you're in a relationship with a narcissist. Reflect on that difference. Again, infidelity in a long-term relationship can be really, really devastating. It can be even more devastating if you grew up in a family system where you saw it happen between your own parents. It can also bring up those old feelings of not feeling safe and of what it must have felt like for the other parent who was going through it and being cheated on, or, God forbid, feeling like you were the one who had to keep one of your parents' secrets. So there is a difference, and only you know, I mean, which story is yours, but to understand it feels different. And when you go online and get that cheating information, it's all smushed up, be aware that the kinds of stories, the kind of healing, and the kind of hurt looks and feels very different. And again, for all of you, I really hope that you do have a relationship that's characterized by trust, respect, and open communication. All of you deserve it, and hopefully at some point in your life, either you're already having it now because you've gotten out of a narcissistic relationship, or you find it in the future. That's my hope for all of you.